This is an episode about pride, about ego, and about the horrible realization that your spouse might be beating you at life, even if neither of you actually understands how money works.
Everyone, guess what? I make more money than my husband.
Al Bundy has never needed to be rich. He's never needed to be respected. He's never even needed to be happy. But there's always been one unspoken rule in the Bundy household. Peggy doesn't make money, she spends it. That's the system. That's the balance. That's the only thing keeping the universe from collapsing in on itself. Because the second Peggy starts bringing home more money than Al does, suddenly nothing makes sense anymore. The man selling women's shoes is no longer the financial rock of the family. He's just a guy losing to Peggy at money, somehow. And worse than the money is what it represents. Proof that Peggy might actually be winning at life without trying, without understanding how, and without ever leaving the couch for long. And with that in mind, welcome back to The Rank. I'm John, and today we're going to be ranking the 14th episode of the third season of Married with Children, titled A 3-Job, No-Income Family, written by Richard Gurman and directed by Jerry Cohen. So let's see how this one stacks up, starting with the episode overview. We open with a familiar sight of Bud and Kelly pestering each other on the couch. Then Al comes over and grunts. So they separate and let him sit between them. And this is going to be the start of a fun caveman bit. Al's going to yell out to Peg, "Peg, dinner!" And then Bud replies, "Peg no home." After which Kelly says, "Peg go shop, we no eat." So since Peg's not home to cook, Al asks Kelly to try her hand at cooking. But Kelly's like, "Hey, I'm practically a woman now. I don't cook. Why don't you just do what I do when I get hungry? Get a date." And of course, Bud's gonna make a snide remark about her being a slut or whatever. But Al doesn't care about that. He wants to know how Bud eats because Bud doesn't go on dates. Well, Bud's learned to live off the land. That's when we get this kind of funny story that's really just sad, actually, with Bud talking about finding fuzzy M&Ms on the floor and using that for food. And it's funny, right? But damn, man, that's fucked up. But that story is what charges Al up to go hunt for food in the kitchen with Bud. And while they're looking, Peggy comes home. She comes home with several bags from shopping and is complaining to Al about how he doesn't make enough money because she can never shop as long as she wants to, or buy as much as she wants. So she's decided Al needs to get another job. Of course, Al's gonna go through a litany of gross things that he'd rather do than work a second job. Which I get, Al. One's enough. I did that 2-job life in my 20s, and I'll tell you, I wasn't approaching middle class with it. But it doesn't really matter because Peggy is determined that he's gonna get a second job. And so she's looking in the paper at the classifieds for one. Naturally, Marcy is over because she's just over, and Peggy is going over the options with her, and the first one is chicken plucker. And apparently that pays more than a shoe salesman. But unfortunately, it requires a good personality. So that one won't work. Next is sperm donation, but Peggy laments that they want someone with experience, which Peg seems to think he doesn't have. I mean, I get the joke, but also he's got 2 kids. Unless they're not his, I don't know. But Marcy's gonna suggest a pit bull training place because she has a friend that runs a pit bull training school. I mean, he could even work his way up to the guy with the tranquilizer gun. But Peggy shoots that one down as well because she says his aim isn't very good. After all, you've seen their bathroom. And Marcy agrees, "Yeah, I've also seen your kids," she says, which is just really fucked up. I mean, even the live audience was like, "Oh, yeah, you can't say that." But either way, Peggy's gonna find the perfect fit for him. The ad says no skills, no experience, no brain required. Marcy's gonna be like, "Well, that's everything but his name." Anyway, the job is to be a Patty Bright girl, which is basically a play on the Mary Kay pyramid scheme thing. We're gonna cut to the interview of sorts. It's Peggy interviewing on Al's behalf, which seems to be no problem to the interviewer. But the best part, in my opinion, was when Peg brings this woman a cup of coffee and she takes a sip and makes this face like it's just terrible. And then on top of the face, groans. And then right after she is done making the face and groaning, she compliments it. But she's selling the gig, and she sells it so well that Peggy decides it's too good for Al. And heck, it only takes $250 to get started. Can she write her a bad check for it? And she's like, "Yeah, we'll just put a lien on your husband's wages." Okay. Now, I was expecting things to go terribly. But right away, we see her ordering a bunch of products and getting a nice commission. Now, Al's gonna come home with the kids right after this, and they're all thanking him for giving them a meal, and then apologizing to him that it's too bad sad that he didn't have enough money to get his own meal as well. And then after we find out that the kids had Al kicked out of the restaurant for whining and begging, Peg is going to come over and ask if she were ever able to find a little job, could she keep the money she makes? Of course, Al screws this up and says, Peg, if ever the day should come when somebody pays you for what you do, grab it and spend it quickly because the world is coming to an end. And then he sees the check. Okay, Peg, we know that Oprah isn't paying people to watch her show with their mouths open. So how'd you get the money? Well, she's a Patty Bright girl. She sells cosmetics in her spare time. And Al rightfully points out, so it's a full-time job then. But her check is bigger than Al's. So now the kids are rubbing it in, wondering if they should still call him Dad. Then the cherry on top is Bud asking his dad if he could pinpoint the moment that life passed him by. And Al says, son, life didn't pass me by, it sat on my head. I feel like we can all feel that a little bit, right? But then Kelly's like, I still love you, Dad. I just don't respect you. And Peggy's gonna be like, don't worry, I'm not gonna go announce it to the neighborhood, and then immediately goes outside and announces to the neighborhood that she's making more money than her husband. And you know what's funny? I wish my wife made more than me. It'd be awesome. But we're gonna go to the next scene here, which starts with Al making a toothpaste sandwich, which is just awful, just terrible. Just eat the bread. Why put toothpaste on it? But right before we're gonna get him actually eating the sandwich, we're gonna get a voiceover that is a flashback of his childhood, where a woman asks Al what he wants to be when he grows up. And child Al says he wants to be president. And then the woman's voice says, well, then you will. And then afterward, Al is sort of done reminiscing, and he says out loud, yeah, right, Mom. Try saying that when you're sober. This is all funny stuff, but damn, all you have to do is make this even slightly more dramatic, mute the audience laughing, and it's pretty damn dark. Now, Steve's gonna come over after this, and he's gonna try to give Al a pep talk. The pep talk doesn't go well, though. He's saying he's proud of Marcy, but it soon devolves into her not being as good of a cook as his mom. Some good old-fashioned misogyny happening here. And it's just sort of wild to look back at this because back then, this was like a relatable line of jokes for people. Nobody was like, this just seems kind of wild, like she's just making more money than him. It's kind of amazing how much has changed in the nearly 40 years. But we've got to land another joke here, right? They had Al make the toothpaste sandwich, but they didn't have him eat it. Why? Well, because they wanted Steve to take a bite of it. Now, I get that it's funny that he would end up biting it, but who is going over to a neighbor's house, sitting down, and then just grabbing a sandwich that their neighbor made and just taking a bite out of it? That's just kind of crazy, and it's all for Al to ask Steve if he wants floss with his meal. But the pep talk does do one thing. Al is going to decide that he can't let Peggy win. He's going to get a secret second job so that he can start bringing in more money than her. What's the second job? He's working at a fast food burger joint that's meant to be a send-off of Star Trek called Burger Trek. And amazingly, the manager of the place is a young guy played by none other than Pauly Shore, who I was not expecting to see, so that was fun. Now we're gonna get a whole bunch of jokes about how disgusting fast food joints are and how they sell kangaroo meat and stuff like that. And some young guys are asking each other why a 60-year-old man would want to work in this dump. And Al's gonna overhear them and says, to meet chicks. And right after that, Pauly Shore is going to come back onto screen, and he's going to be trying to get Al to do a better job. He's going to level with him. You know, he can't do all the jobs at the restaurant. He's up on the bridge doing his homework. I mean, what does Al want him to do? Flunk out of school and become like a bum or a shoe salesman? Then we're going to end the scene with a classic Al Bundy joke where Pauly Shore is going to go over the PA system at the restaurant and say, will the crew member who overflowed the toilet come to the bridge, please? It's obviously Al, of course. In the next scene, we're back at the Bundys, and Steve is there again, going through the Bundys' mail or something. I don't know what he's doing there or why he's the one to find Peggy's commission check, but he is. Apparently, it's a pretty good check, though, because Al is frustrated. How does she do it, Steve? How can she make more money than someone selling shoes and hamburgers? And Steve's gonna be like, look, Al, I made more money than you when I lost a tooth when I was a kid, which is a pretty solid burn. But Al just can't believe it. I mean, her customers must be morons, which puts an idea into his head. He needs to find her customer list so he can sell them shoes and hamburgers. Of course, the whole time he was actually holding the list, which makes Steve's eyes roll as he points it out. But this is where the shoe drops, if you will. Every one of Peggy's customers is Peggy herself. She's her own customer, Steve. And then Steve's gonna tell Al that his life is pathetic, but then immediately gets his comeuppance when Marcy yells from across the street that the fish sticks are thawing. And you know what? That is definitely not more pathetic. I'm just saying. Also, damn, her voice must really carry because she's calling from like across the street and they're hearing her at the other side of the house with the door closed. But now Al has to explain to Peggy how commission works. She hasn't made a dime. She's convinced that she has because they send her checks. But Al points out, but you send them bigger ones. That, in the business world, is what we call sending your husband rocketing to the poorhouse. But the question is, why didn't she sell any of the cosmetics? Because, like she told the girls, they're not very good. Well, then why did you keep buying it? Because that's how she makes her money. And it turns out she actually owes Patty Bright Cosmetics $623. And then Al resignedly says, at least you're not in real estate. But Al knows what he has to do. And we think it's going to mean that he has to keep working 2 jobs. However, as we cut back to Burger Trek, we find out that it's Peggy working the burger job. Now that feels right. But that's the end of the episode. Let's find out how it ranked.
Rank.
So the Rankings are ranked the episode based on 5 categories: story, acting, dialogue, episode coherence, and character relatability. I rank it on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. And then I have a laugh counter where I tally up the amount of times the episode made me laugh. 1 point per laugh out loud gets added to the score. But before I dive into the rankings, I just want to say if you're enjoying this episode, please leave a like down below. It really does help me out. But without further ado, let's go to the first category, which is story. And it's a pretty decent story. The misogynistic undertones aren't great though. And I know some of you might say, but it was a different time. And while you're right, during this time, I was being raised by a single mom, so fuck that noise. That being said, the idea that she was thinking that she was making more money than her husband because she was spending a ton of money and essentially getting a rebate check is a great storyline. So I gave it a 4. And that brings us to acting. The acting was good. I actually thought Ed and Katie were fantastic. Just the absolute life resignation of Al Bundy is something that Ed O'Neill does so well. I gave it a 4.25. Next category is dialogue, and it was funny, but not as funny as it should have been considering the premise. A guy feeling emasculated for making less money than his wife is actually probably still relevant. But the constant allusions to the idea that a wife who is working should still be cooking and doing laundry and all that stuff got a little old. Also though, Peggy should actually be doing that stuff, because if she's not working outside of the home, I mean really she should be working in it. And she's not watching the kids because they're in school. And I don't want to sound like a chauvinist or anything, but I mean come on. I gave it a 2.5. So that brings us to episode coherence. It definitely flowed. I loved the build up to finding out that Peggy wasn't actually making any money. And in the first and second seasons, Married with Children was really satirizing the traditional gender roles in a marriage and in a family and in life in general, especially by giving Peggy a lot of sexual fidelity. But I feel like this episode and the last one don't really hit that mark as well. So it's either that these 2 episodes are falling out of coherence with the series as a whole, or the show is changing. Either way, I gave it a 4.25. And that brings us to character relatability. I mean, these poor kids, they don't eat. Al's mom was a drunk. You take out the laughing live audience and just a little of the absurdity, and this is like a dark drama. And I just don't think this episode was as relatable now as it might have been back then, but it's still relatable. I gave it a 3.25. So some up and down rankings here. Not really all that bad, but not great. A decent laugh counter should keep it in the top 3 tiers. It actually only got me 12 times, which isn't terrible, but it's not as good as Married with Children usually does. It did just barely keep it in the top 3 tiers though, as it got a 30.25, which puts it as an I'd watch it again. For the series, the average is now to 33.59, which keeps the series in an I'd watch it again. And if you're ranking along with me, drop your score in the comments. I'd be really curious to see how we align on this one. But thanks for listening and or watching. Check out my other Married with Children episodes or any of my other sitcom ranking or movie ranking episodes on this channel. Remember to subscribe, comment, and like. Full rankings are on my website at therankpodcast.com, where you can also email me at john@therankpodcast.com. And if you really want to support the show, you can become a patron at patreon.com/therankpodcast. But I will leave you with this. Why wasn't Peggy upset about the cosmetics scam? Because she was happy that someone was finally willing to take advantage of her.
What the was that?
You know, I'm not proud of him, but like, you know, yeah, that's what I did. Then we end this scene with a classic Al Bundy joke where Pauly Shore is going to go over the PA system and ask for the crew member who overflowed the the toilet. Fuck, I almost had it.
Ooh, you almost had it.